Hey, welcome to On the Clock, a collaboration between the Pack-A-Day Podcast and the Draft Fellows. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows. Together, we are the Draft Fellows. And leading up to the draft, we'll be doing a series that covers picks 1 through 32, each team's biggest needs and who they should be considering at their pick. You can check out the video of all 32 episodes on the Draft Fellows channel on YouTube. All of the previous audio versions on the Pack-A-Day stream were already up to pick 21 and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kyle, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, and it is amazing. We are getting so much closer to the real NFL draft, and we just keep churning through these episodes. It kind of feels like the spring is like flying by in a lot of ways, and there are still some prospects that I would like to get to. Some day three guys that the list is still there, and we're running out of time. So, but it's a good problem. We are getting closer and closer to the 2025 NFL draft. And with this series, we are on to pick 21 and those Pittsburgh Steelers. And we always kind of set this up by talking about what are the needs that the Steelers could address as they get into the draft. And the Steelers are probably looking at some combination of quarterback, running back, tackle, and safety. And quarterback is a huge need for this team. We know that Rodgers has spent a significant amount of time with the Steelers organization in the last couple of weeks, but we don't know. Like, as of recording this right now, if Rodgers is going to end up in Pittsburgh or not. Maybe by the time this drops, we'll have that resolved. But with or without Aaron Rodgers, this is a team that could certainly dip into the draft for the future of the quarterback position, regardless of if, Rodgers plays a year or two. They need to look beyond that. So it remains a very interesting position for them. And the Steelers, and in addition to quarterback, just kind of feel like a team that should have a stud running back. Like, that's super base level analysis there, but I feel like there should be a good running back in Pittsburgh. Najee Harris has moved on to the Chargers. The Steelers still have Jalen Warren, and they added Kenneth Gainwell. But in a draft class with this much running back talent, you'd think that they would look to address that need, maybe even early. The offensive line is pretty much set for the Steelers. They hit on Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick last year in the draft, and Troy Fautano will likely start at right tackle, where Broderick Jones is going to be your left tackle. Now, Broderick Jones hasn't been especially good, so maybe if they already feel like they know that they need a long-term replacement there at left tackle down the road, maybe that becomes a consideration earlier in this draft than maybe some people think. And safety might be another consideration for this team, with really just Minkah Fitzpatrick and Deshaun Elliott on the roster. But the Steelers just brought in Juwan Thornhill. So maybe that changes that need a little bit. Maybe they don't look at safety. But it's interesting, after bringing over DK Metcalf in free agency, the Steelers are in a relatively good spot to just kind of take the best player available when they are on the clock.
Yeah, and if you take a look at the trade options, the Steelers could be a trade down candidate, but in my opinion, they're in a really good spot to stick and pick, and that tends to be the Pittsburgh way of doing business, is to stay in your selection and move forward with that. I think talking about their needs, they could be here to grab RB2. I mean, maybe there's a world that Ashton Genty falls to them, and it's not looking very likely at this point. But probably an RB2 landing spot. I think if they wanted to be in that left tackle market, this is an interesting spot as well. And, safety 1 could still be available here as well. Although you mentioned with the Juwan Thornhill addition, maybe that's not as big of a need. So some of the players that they could be looking at, you're talking about North Carolina running back Omarion Hampton, maybe Travion Henderson from Ohio State, the other Ohio State running back. I say other sort of in jokingly, but Quinshon Judkins, both really, really good players. If they wanted an offensive tackle, Josh Simmons from Ohio State, that seems kind of Pittsburgh-ish, a player with a really high upside that has, the injury and could be a perfect fill-in at left tackle. Maybe like somebody like Josh Carnley Jr. out of Oregon, or Arante Ursary out of Minnesota. And the safety, as I mentioned before, safety 1, who we perceive as Malachi Starks, the Georgia safety, or maybe they like Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina even better. Sort of a physical freak of nature that they could post back there in the deep part of their defense. But could be the quarterback landing spot? I know you addressed that a little bit. Could Shedeur Sanders slide this far?
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting storyline. And then, potentially we hear a lot of whispers about Jackson Dart landing in the first round. Could this be that sort of obvious spot for Pittsburgh to take a look there. So those are just some of the options. But now we wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of players that we think they should be targeting at pick 21.
Yeah, I think they are going to heavily consider quarterback at some point. They just I feel like they have to at least work that through, right? Like, is there an option that makes sense for them? Jackson Dart is a scary proposition when you just did the Kenny Pickett experiment, and that not that they're the same player, but the range in the draft where you take the player and it just kind of feels so eerily similar on the surface. Like, would they do it? I don't know, but I would love to see Omarion Hampton in this offense. I think he can help you if Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback. I think he can help you if you have a young quarterback and that you're trying to get comfortable in an offense. I think he would benefit also from having two wide receivers like DK Metcalf and George Pickens to keep the safeties out of the box, right? So Pittsburgh is a bit of a wild card, but it's so interesting to me. You talked about, like, we're assuming that Gentry's gone. Omarion Hampton is probably running back 2. Just working this through with Pittsburgh, like, what is the ceiling for running back 3 to come off the board? And if Omarion Hampton goes, like, say 12 to the Dallas Cowboys or 10 to the Chicago Bears, is there a world where this is a good enough running back class where actually running back 3 could come off the board as early as this pick? It's just going to be fascinating. I do think that Pittsburgh is a wild card, but I like them to be in this running back conversation and potentially even a quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those. And for me, this is sort of that like weird place in this particular draft. Pick 21, you're probably talking about a bunch of players that are kind of like maybe first, probably second round values. And so I think you could order about 30 different players in any order, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them get picked at 21 or to get picked at 51.
Yeah.
And so I don't think taking RB3 here would be a particularly big problem. I could see a player like Travion Henderson being really intriguing as that explosive weapon where you're letting your outside receivers really open up a lot of space and you can run some light boxes. Maybe an even more Pittsburgh Steelers running back is, and I'm going to forget his name all of a sudden, the Iowa running back.
Caleb Johnson.
Caleb Johnson. Thank you.
Yes.
And I mean, to me, he just screams Pittsburgh Steeler. Like that, there's just so many fun things about his game that I think he would be somebody that the Pittsburgh faithful would really love. For me, a couple of names that I really like. I mentioned Malachi Starks. He's a do everything safety. I think he would be the ideal fit in the Mike Tomlin defense. You laid out probably not a big need for them. And on the back end of the defense. And maybe that's a little redundant, but I do think that he would be a very interesting player to get to learn in that Pittsburgh defense. But I'm probably even more intrigued by Josh Simmons. The Steelers are one of the most patient organizations in the NFL. So getting a potentially elite left tackle in the 20s would be a really fun storyline, even if they have to wait a year for him to really be ready to go and step in and be the full-time left tackle. I think that Josh Simmons could end up being one of those players where you look back in 5 years and you say, how did somebody get him at pick 21?
Yeah, I agree completely. Josh Simmons is one of those players that I have. He is probably, I'd have to look for sure, but one of my top 10 highest graded players in the entire class. And this is a podcast that goes out to a Packers centric audience. And it's interesting that he's a player that at 23, the Packers don't need a left tackle, but this is the same range, same kind of player that you're like, man, if you have the opportunity to take a player that can help your team over the long haul, you do that anytime you can. So maybe it's a player like that. Maybe it's a running back. We're just going to have to wait and see what the Steelers do when they are, in fact, on the clock. But thanks for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show and stick with us as we preview all 32 teams in this series leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft. From the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game. Thank you.